Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zhen Li, a PhD candidate at Huazhong University of Science and Technology. In today's talk, I will talk about my research on deep learning-based system for vulnerability detection. This work is cooperated with Professor Zhou, Professor Jin, Mr. O, Ms. Wang, Ms. Deng, and Ms. Zhong from HUST, and Professor Xu from UTSA. At present, the software security problems usually are rooted in vulnerabilities. Automatic software vulnerability detection is an important research problem. There are many static vulnerability detection tools and studies, ranging from source code tools to commercial tools to academic research projects. And there are mainly two drawbacks of existing approaches. First, the existing solutions usually rely on human experts to define features. Even for experts, this is a tedious, subjective, and sometimes error-prone task. The second drawback is existing solutions often miss some vulnerabilities. For example, VulDeePecker and VulDeePecker are two most recent vulnerability detection systems. They incur high false negative rates. The goal of our study is to solve the following problems. Given the source code of a target program, how can we determine whether or not the target program is vulnerable, and if so, the locations of the vulnerabilities? Considering the limitations, considering the about two limitations, the limitations motivate the importance of designing deep learning-based vulnerability detection without asking human experts to define features and without incurring a high false positive rate or a high false negative rate. Our main contribution is to propose a deep learning-based system called VulDeePecker for automatically detecting vulnerabilities in programs. We focus on source code. Our talk mainly covers 5 parts: guiding principles for deep learning-based vulnerability detection, and design of VulDeePecker, experiments and results, limitations and contribution, and conclusion. Now, let's start by guiding principles. Guiding principles mainly focus on 3 fundamental questions. The first is how to represent software programs for deep learning-based vulnerability detection. Programs should be transformed into some intermediate representation that can preserve the semantic relationships between the program's elements, such as data dependency or control dependency. The second question is, what is the appropriate granularity for deep learning-based vulnerability detection? In order to help pin down the locations of the vulnerability, a program should be represented at a finer granularity than treating a program or function as a unit. The second question is how to select a specific neural network for vulnerability detection. Because a statement, whether a statement is vulnerable or not, may depend on context. Neural networks that can cope with context may be suitable for vulnerability detection. In our study, we select the bidirectional BLSTM, since the statement may be affected by earlier statements and may be also affected by later statements. The comparison with other neural networks is left as an interesting problems for the future work. After discussing guiding principles, I will elaborate on the design of VulDeePecker. This is the overview of VulDeePecker. There are mainly two phases, the learning phase and the detection phase. The input of the learning phase is a large number of training programs. The output of the learning phase is a vulnerability patterns that can be encoded into a trained BLSTM neural network. And the detection phase uses a trained BLSTM neural network to classify the code gadgets of the target programs. The output of the detection phase is whether the code gadget is vulnerable or not. That is the locations of the vulnerability. First of all, we propose the context of a code gadget. What is code gadget? A code gadget is a unit for vulnerability detection. It is composed of a number of program statements that are semantically related to each other in terms of data dependency or control dependency. We use vulnerabilities related to library or API function calls as an example. The first step is to generate code gadgets. There are three sub-steps. The first sub-step is to extract the library or API function calls from the program source code, and then generate slices for each argument of library or API function calls, and then assemble the program slices into a code gadget. From this figure, we can see the code gadget corresponding to store copy in line 9. The statements are semantically related to store copy in terms of data dependency. And the second step is generate ground truth labels. Whether a code gadget is vulnerable or not depends on whether it contains any vulnerable statements, which can be obtained according to the vulnerability data sources. As a result, each code gadget is labeled as 1, that is vulnerable, or 0, that is not vulnerable. The third step is to transform code gadgets into vectors. First, transform code gadgets into their symbolic representations. Specifically, we first remove non-API characters and comments, and then map the user-defined variables to symbolic names in a one-to-one fashion, and then map user-defined function names to symbolic names in the one-to-one fashion. After that, we encode the symbolic representation into vectors. First, we divided the symbolic representation of code gadgets into a sequence of tokens, and then we encode each token into a vector. And at last, we encode the symbolic representation of code gadget into the vector into a fixed length vector. Thus, we encode the symbolic representation in two vectors. The fourth step is to train the BLSTM neural network. The training process of this neural network is standard. The output is a trained BLSTM neural network with fine-tuned parameters. Next is the detection phase. In the detection phase, we first generate the code gadget of target programs, and then generate the vectors of the code gadgets, and then use a trained BLSTM neural network to classify the code gadgets in the vector representation. The output is whether the code gadgets are vulnerable or not. Now let's show the experiments and results. Our study focused on 3 research questions. I will elaborate on each question in the following. In order to answer these 3 research questions, we use 5 metrics for evaluation. That is false positive rate, false negative rate, recall precision, and F measure. And the closer the FPR and FNR to 0, and the recall precision and F measure to 1, the better the effectiveness of the vulnerability detection system. We collect the programs from 2 sources of vulnerability data, that is NVD and SARD. And we focus on 2 types of vulnerabilities, that is buffer error vulnerabilities and resource management error vulnerabilities. Each of these types of vulnerabilities has multiple subtypes. For training programs and target programs, we randomly choose 80% of the programs we collect as training programs, and the rest as target programs. We construct the code Gadget database of 61,638 code gadgets. In order to answer our research questions, we used CGD to derive 6 data sets. Among them, BE, RM, and HY represents the type of vulnerabilities. BE and RM focus on a single type of vulnerabilities, and HY represents a hybrid of about 2 types of vulnerabilities. ALL and SEL represent the focus, represent the scope of the library API function calls. Respectively, or ALL represents all library API function calls, and SEL represents manually selected library API function calls related to vulnerabilities. The first research question is, can VulDeePecker deal with multiple types of vulnerabilities at the same time? This table illustrates the results of research question, the first research question. From the table, we can see that the neural network trained by RM ALL dataset outperforms the neural networks trained from BE ALL datasets in terms of all 5 metrics. This can be explained by the fact that the number of function calls related to RM vulnerabilities is far smaller than function calls related to BE vulnerabilities. The insight is that VulDeePecker can detect multiple types of vulnerabilities, but effectiveness is sensitive to the amount of data, which is common to deep learning. The second research question is, can human intelligence, other than defining features, improve the effectiveness of VulDeePecker? From this table, we can see that the neural networks trained from the HYSEL outperforms the neural networks trained from HYALL in terms of all 5 metrics. The insight is that human experts can be used to select function calls to improve the effectiveness of VulDeePecker. The third research question is, how effective is VulDeePecker when compared with other approaches? We compare VulDeePecker with static analysis tools. From this table, we can see that VulDeePecker substantially outperforms other pattern-based vulnerability detection systems. We draw the following insight. A deep learning-based vulnerability detection system can be more effective by taking advantage of the data flow information. We also compare VulDeePecker with co-similarity-based approaches. From this table, we can see that for BESEL NVD subdata site, VulD and VulDeePecker treat high false negative rate for low false positive rate. And these two systems can now detect the vulnerabilities that are not caused by code clones, which explains the high false negative rate. The insight is that VulDeePecker is more effective than co-similarity-based approaches. When using VulDeePecker in practice, it detected 4 vulnerabilities, which were not reported in the NVD, but were suddenly patched by the vendors when they release the later versions. And these vulnerabilities are missed by most of the other vulnerability systems mentioned above. Now let's talk about the limitations and open problems. From the following 3 aspects, the present design of VulDeePecker assumes source code is available and only dealing with C or C++ programs, only deal with vulnerabilities related to library or API function calls, and only accommodate data flow information but not control flow information, and use some heuristics. The present implementation of VulDeePecker is limited to the BLSTM neural network. The present evaluation of VulDeePecker is limited because the dataset only contains 2 types of vulnerabilities. Though these 2 types of vulnerabilities contains many multiple subtypes. Finally, conclusion. We initiate the study of using deep learning for vulnerability detection and discuss some preliminary guiding principles for deep learning-based vulnerability detection. We present VulDeePecker and evaluate from 3 perspectives. And we present the first dataset for evaluating deep learning-based vulnerability detection system. We have made the data vulnerable publicable. There are some new results. We try to cope with all kinds of vulnerabilities, including library API function calls related vulnerabilities. We accommodate both data dependency and control dependency. We detect 7 potential zero-day vulnerabilities and 8 silently patched vulnerabilities from 4 software projects. And we found some deep neural networks are more powerful than others. These are takeaways. The first deep learning-based vulnerability detection system using a finer granularity unit, that is called Gadget. Some guiding principles for deep learning-based vulnerability detection. And we propose the first dataset for evaluating deep learning-based vulnerability detection systems. That's all of my presentation. Thank you.
So we are running a little late, so maybe only one question.
Hi, my name is Gary Tishu, and I work in industry. My question is in regard to vulnerabilities what is your source of vulnerabilities that you are examining the code against?
Oh, I didn't catch what you said. Can you say it again, please?
Yes. What is your source of vulnerabilities that you are examining the code against?
So the source of the vulnerabilities? You mean the source of the vulnerabilities?
Yes, the source, the library that describes all the vulnerabilities that your system is checking your candidate architecture against issues. What is the source? Like, I know I saw CVEs up there quickly, but is that the source or other sources?
We use two data source, CVE, NVD, and SARD, SARD. And we use we generate the code gadgets from the programs from the NVD and SARD, and labeled them according to the vulnerability locations they provide.
And just one other follow-up question in regard to these vulnerabilities. Does your system cover all types of CVEs, or is it in a particular functional area?
No, we only this paper only focuses on the vulnerabilities related to library or API function calls. That is the misuse of the library or API function calls caused the vulnerability.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.